Have you ever wondered why the loudest voices often hide the deepest pain? Thanos, one of the most powerful beings in the universe, is a perfect example of this paradox. On the outside, he's confident, commanding, and unyielding. His actions seem calculated, with a singular goal that drives him to reshape the universe. But beneath this powerful exterior lies a man who is deeply broken. His pain is not just a side effect of his quest, it is the fuel that drives it. In his pursuit of balance, Thanos projects a sense of unshakable strength, yet his true vulnerability is hiding in plain sight. To understand Thanos, we must first understand the trauma that has shaped him. At the core of his being is a profound loss, a trauma that echoes through every decision he makes. This loss has created a void in his soul that no amount of power or destruction can fill. Thanos is haunted by the memory of his home planet, Titan, which was destroyed due to overpopulation and the lack of resources. He carries the guilt of not being able to prevent it, and this trauma fuels his belief that the universe must be balanced through drastic measures. However, his quest for balance is not about saving others, it's about filling the emptiness inside him. The defense mechanism Thanos uses is projection. He justifies his horrific actions by convincing himself that he is doing it for the greater good. By removing half of all life in the universe, he believes he is saving it. His mind refuses to acknowledge the emotional toll of his choices, as he convinces himself that the suffering he causes is necessary for a greater cause. This defense mechanism allows him to remain steadfast in his mission, even when the consequences are catastrophic. However, beneath this logic lies an inner conflict. Thanos wants to be the hero, the savior of the universe, but deep down, he knows he is causing immense suffering. This internal struggle makes him more complex than just a villain. It shows that even the most powerful beings can be tormented by their own emotions. The trigger for Thanos' actions comes from his trauma and the belief that only by wiping out half of the universe can he prevent the destruction he witnessed on Titan. His obsession with this mission blinds him to the real cost of his actions, pushing him further into isolation. As Thanos executes his plan, we begin to see cracks in his confidence. The emotional breakdown starts to unfold. Despite achieving his goal, he finds no peace. His victory feels hollow, and he's left alone with nothing but the weight of his decisions. In the end, Thanos is not just a conqueror of worlds. He is a man destroyed by his own fears and past failures. Thanos is a complex character, driven by deep, conflicting emotions that stem from his tragic past. His actions, while seemingly rational and calculated, are rooted in a psychological need to reclaim control over his life and the universe. What many fail to see is that his need for control is not just about power, but about dealing with the overwhelming feelings of helplessness he experienced in his past. This need to control others, to reshape the universe to his own design, comes from a place of deep insecurity. Thanos' traumatic past, the destruction of his home planet, left him with a fundamental belief that life, in its current form, is unsustainable. His planet's collapse was not just a loss of resources or life, it was the shattering of his own sense of security. This event, along with his failure to prevent it, instilled in him a belief that the universe, left unchecked, would eventually suffer the same fate. This is where his psychological pattern begins. Thanos' defense mechanism is an obsessive drive for order. By eliminating half of all life, he believes he can avoid the suffering and devastation that he witnessed on Titan. His mind convinces him that this is the only way to save the universe, but it is, in reality, a way to avoid confronting the deeper, unresolved trauma that haunts him. The obsession with control and order becomes Thanos' way of coping with the pain he can no longer ignore. This obsession, however, creates a massive inner conflict. Thanos does not view himself as a villain, but as a savior. He believes that by imposing his vision of balance, he is preventing the same fate from befalling other worlds. However, deep down, he is also aware that his actions are harmful, and this internal contradiction creates a constant tension within him. Despite his strong outward persona, Thanos struggles with his own guilt and self-doubt. This internal battle is particularly evident in his moments of solitude. While he may appear confident and assured in his mission, he is often left alone with the weight of his decisions. The trauma of his past and the destructive path he's chosen to walk cause him to question whether he is truly justified in his actions, even as he continues to pursue his goal. The trigger for Thanos' extreme actions comes from the loss of Titan. This catastrophic event in his life is the defining moment that drives him to seek balance. It fuels his belief that his extreme measures are necessary to prevent further destruction. His mission is triggered by a desperate desire to stop the universe from following the same path as his doomed home. As Thanos moves forward in his mission, the emotional breakdown becomes inevitable. No matter how much power he accumulates or how many people he removes from existence, he cannot escape the gnawing feeling that something is missing. He is never able to fill the void left by Titan's destruction. This emotional collapse occurs in the quietest moments, where the weight of his actions becomes clear. The consequences of his decisions are immense. By attempting to bring order through destruction, Thanos becomes a prisoner of his own making. He isolates himself from any meaningful connection or true emotional fulfillment. The universe may be balanced, but he is left alone with nothing but the realization that his journey has only furthered his own emptiness. The emotional bridge between Thanos and the audience is found in this shared experience of loss and the desire for control. Thanos represents the part of every person that feels overwhelmed by loss and seeks to reshape the world in a way that will prevent further suffering. His story is a reminder that even the most powerful beings are not immune to the scars of their past. The open question that lingers after examining Thanos' journey is, can true healing ever come from controlling others, or must we first confront our own pain? This question challenges viewers to reflect on their own lives, their own traumas, and whether they, too, are searching for control in order to avoid confronting their deeper emotions. Thanos' inner conflict is rooted in his unmet needs, which drive his actions and decisions throughout his journey. He is a character who is constantly seeking control, but what he truly desires is something deeper, a resolution to the overwhelming feelings of guilt, loss, and failure that he has carried with him since the destruction of Titan. His need for control comes from a place of vulnerability, as he believes that by controlling the universe, he can prevent further destruction and avoid the helplessness he felt when his planet fell apart. Thanos' trauma, however, is not something that can be fixed by simply eliminating half of all life. It is an internal struggle that cannot be addressed by an external solution. Despite his power, he is unable to reconcile the pain he feels from the loss of his home and the guilt that haunts him for not being able to save it. His desire for balance, then, is not just about saving the universe, but about saving himself from the emotional devastation that has defined his life. This emotional turmoil creates a constant tension within Thanos. On one hand, he presents himself as a stoic figure, certain of his purpose and unwavering in his belief that his mission is righteous. On the other hand, he is driven by an undeniable fear of failure and a deep need for validation. Thanos has never truly been able to accept his past, and his failure to save Titan is a wound that never healed. His quest for universal balance is, in reality, an attempt to impose order on the chaos that exists inside him. The psychological needs Thanos seeks to fulfill are not just about achieving power. They are about finding a sense of peace that he has never experienced. He believes that by executing his plan, he will bring closure to the trauma he has been unable to escape. However, his actions only further entrench him in his feelings of isolation and failure. His need for validation is evident throughout his journey. Thanos constantly seeks to justify his actions, presenting them as necessary for the greater good. But deep inside, he knows that the cost of his actions is more than he is willing to acknowledge. The conflict between his desire for control and the guilt he feels over the lives he has taken is what ultimately drives him to madness. Despite the immense power at his disposal, Thanos is still searching for a sense of emotional fulfillment that he can never seem to attain. His inner conflict becomes most apparent in his moments of solitude. These moments reveal his true vulnerability, the weight of his decisions, the loneliness of his path, and the emotional cost of his actions are too much for him to bear. He is a character who cannot escape his past, and this inability to reconcile with his trauma is what leads to his downfall. Thanos' unresolved emotional needs are what keep him locked in a cycle of destruction and self-delusion. He believes that by balancing the universe, he will find peace, but in reality, his quest only drives him further away from it. His inner turmoil and the constant battle between his need for control and his guilt ultimately define his tragic journey. Thanos' psychological turning point, or trigger, comes from his belief that the universe is out of balance and that he alone can restore it. This belief is driven by the pain he feels from the loss of his home planet, Titan. His trauma from the destruction of Titan created a sense of urgency in him. He became convinced that without drastic intervention, the universe would face inevitable collapse. For Thanos, the trigger is not just an event, but a deeply ingrained conviction that action must be taken to prevent further destruction. The idea that balance must be achieved by eliminating half of all life is the culmination of his years of suffering, guilt, and obsession with control. Thanos' trigger is emotionally complex because it is rooted in his failure to save Titan, a failure that continuously haunts him. He projects his trauma onto the entire universe, viewing the widespread suffering and overpopulation as the same forces that led to his home's demise. This mindset forces him to see his plan not as a choice, but as a necessity, a solution to the problem that cannot be ignored. The trigger reveals how deeply ingrained Thanos' trauma is. It's not merely about power or domination. It's about the desperate need to prevent the universe from suffering the same fate as Titan. His need for control becomes all-consuming, and this need outweighs any other consideration, including the lives of countless beings. What Thanos fails to see, however, is that his trigger, which he believes to be an answer, is actually the source of his downfall. The very trauma that drives him to act is the force that causes his isolation and emotional collapse. Thanos' conviction that he alone can restore balance blinds him to the fact that his actions are not saving the universe, but are rather pushing him further into a spiral of self-destruction. The emotional breakdown that follows this trigger reveals the core of his conflict. Despite achieving his goal and eradicating half of all life, Thanos finds no satisfaction. The emptiness he feels is not filled by his actions, but is only deepened by them. His emotional turmoil, triggered by the loss of Titan, never truly subsides. Even in victory, he is alone with his guilt and the weight of his decisions. The trigger that sets Thanos on his path toward destruction is not just a single event, but the culmination of years of unresolved trauma, guilt, and a need for control. It is his belief that the universe must be remade, that the balance must be restored, which ultimately becomes his undoing. Thanos' turning point is a psychological one, driven by his failure to come to terms with his past and his desperate need to fix what he perceives as a broken world. This belief, however, is what leads to his downfall, as he sacrifices his own peace and humanity in the pursuit of his goal. The trigger reveals that, despite his immense power, Thanos is still deeply broken inside, unable to escape the emotional scars of his past. As Thanos proceeds with his plan, a gradual psychological collapse begins to unfold. Despite his initial sense of certainty and control, the consequences of his actions begin to weigh on him. He is a man who has sacrificed everything in his pursuit of balance, but with each step closer to his goal, he finds that the peace he envisioned is elusive. The transformation is subtle but undeniable. Thanos initially sees himself as a hero, one who will save the universe by enforcing a new order. However, the deeper he goes into his mission, the more he realizes that this so-called balance comes at a great personal cost. The destruction of half the universe is not a victory. It is a hollow triumph, one that leaves him emotionally bankrupt. As Thanos stands alone in the aftermath of his actions, he is confronted with the emptiness that no amount of power can fill. His sense of control slips away, and he finds himself isolated in a way that mirrors the loneliness he felt after the fall of Titan. The transformation is not just a physical one, but a mental breakdown. Thanos' initial belief that he could rid the universe of its problems and create peace through destruction slowly unravels. The more he succeeds, the more he realizes that his actions are not achieving the balance he sought, but rather creating a deeper chasm of grief within himself. This emotional collapse is further amplified by his own internal conflict. Throughout his journey, Thanos has believed that his actions were justified by his trauma, that he was fixing a broken universe. Yet, as he stands at the end of his journey, he cannot escape the truth. He has become the very thing he despised. The transformation is a realization that no matter how much he tries to control the universe, he cannot control his own emotions. This breakdown is not just a result of the external consequences of his actions, but also the internal realization that his need for control was never about the universe at all. It was about his own inability to accept his past and move forward. Thanos' journey from a seemingly unshakable force to a broken man reflects the profound psychological impact of his trauma. In the end, his quest for balance becomes a metaphor for his own inability to reconcile with his inner turmoil. His collapse is not the result of failure in achieving his goal, but rather a realization that peace cannot be found through destruction, and that no amount of power can erase the emotional scars of his past. The final transformation is the acceptance of his own emptiness, a truth he can no longer deny. The psychological breakdown of Thanos is a tragic reminder that no matter how powerful or determined a person may be, true peace comes not from control, but from confronting and healing from the wounds within. The long-term psychological consequences of Thanos' actions are profound and far-reaching. Despite achieving his goal of balancing the universe, the emotional cost is too great for him to bear. Thanos' journey highlights the inevitable isolation that comes from the pursuit of control. In the aftermath of his decisions, he is left with a crushing sense of emptiness. This void is not something that can be filled by further power or conquest. It is a reminder that the deep emotional wounds that drive a person cannot be healed through external means, no matter how much control they accumulate. Thanos' need for balance, which was initially rooted in a desire to prevent further destruction, ultimately becomes the very thing that drives him further into isolation. The universe he sought to save is now in a state of disarray, and so is his mind. The belief that he alone could restore balance becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, pushing him deeper into his own psyche, where he is forced to confront his failure. The psychological consequences of his journey are not just external. They are internal, shaping the very fabric of his identity. Thanos is left in a state of perpetual emotional decay, unable to reconcile with his actions. His inner conflict, once masked by his obsession with control, now becomes the central focus of his existence. This emotional destruction is compounded by his realization that his efforts to impose balance were futile. The universe may have been changed by his actions, but he is unchanged. Thanos' inability to heal from his trauma leaves him in a state of perpetual suffering. The psychological toll of his decisions is too great, and it isolates him further from any meaningful connection with others. His failure to heal from the wounds of his past prevents him from moving forward, leaving him trapped in a cycle of guilt and regret. The long-term consequences of his actions are evident in his increasing detachment from reality. Thanos' belief in his own righteousness becomes an obsession, and this obsession blinds him to the reality of the damage he has caused. The emotional scars of his past continue to haunt him, and they shape every decision he makes. In the end, Thanos' psychological state reflects the inescapable truth that emotional wounds cannot be fixed by power or control. His journey is a tragic one, not because he failed to achieve his goal, but because he failed to address the emotional pain that drove him in the first place. The long-term consequences of his actions are a reminder that true peace cannot be found through destruction, and that the wounds of the past must be confronted in order to move forward. Thanos' journey resonates deeply with anyone who has ever felt abandoned or misunderstood. His emotional landscape is defined by loneliness, a feeling that is central to his psyche. He isolates himself from others, not because he wants to, but because he believes his mission is one he must carry out alone. The loneliness Thanos experiences is not just physical, but emotional as well. He has chosen a path that distances him from any meaningful connection, and this isolation is a direct result of his belief that only he can save the universe. This deep sense of abandonment, especially after the destruction of his home planet Titan, leads him to a place where he feels he has no choice but to act independently. Thanos feels misunderstood by the universe itself. He believes that his actions, no matter how extreme, are for the greater good, yet he knows that no one else can truly understand the gravity of what he is trying to achieve. His decision to eliminate half of all life comes from this place of profound loneliness and a desperate need to prove that he knows what is best for the universe, even if it means sacrificing everything. The feeling of being misunderstood drives him to make choices that push others away, further isolating him from the very people he might have been able to save. This emotional pain is something that many viewers can relate to, whether in personal relationships or societal struggles. The isolation Thanos experiences is not just a result of his actions. It is also a reflection of his deep-rooted fears and insecurities. He feels abandoned by the universe, believing that it has failed to recognize the importance of his mission. In his mind, the only way to restore balance is to impose his vision, and the loneliness he faces is an unavoidable byproduct of this vision. Many viewers may see themselves in Thanos' struggle, feeling the weight of their own personal loneliness or abandonment. Like Thanos, they may have faced situations where they felt isolated or misunderstood, and this connection allows for empathy even for a character who has made destructive choices. His emotional journey, while extreme, reflects the universal fear of being alone, of not being heard, or of feeling that no one understands the pain inside. For those who have experienced emotional neglect or have struggled with the feeling of being unseen, Thanos' story serves as a powerful reminder of how deep emotional pain can shape a person's decisions. It's a reminder that behind every outward display of strength, there may be a person grappling with feelings of inadequacy and loneliness. Thanos, in his quest to restore balance, demonstrates the tragic consequences of carrying such heavy emotional burdens in isolation. His story is a mirror for those who feel abandoned or misunderstood, inviting the audience to reflect on their own emotional struggles. Thanos' journey resonates deeply with the feelings of abandonment and loneliness that many people experience at some point in their lives. His need to isolate himself, even in the face of immense power, reflects an internal struggle that mirrors the emotional pain of being misunderstood. Throughout his quest, Thanos is driven not just by a desire for control, but by an overwhelming need to feel validated. He believes that his actions are necessary, that he alone understands the true nature of balance. However, this conviction only pushes him further into emotional isolation. Thanos has faced abandonment on a cosmic scale, with the destruction of his home planet and the loss of his family. These events set the stage for a lifetime of emotional turmoil. His subsequent belief that he alone can restore balance to the universe is rooted in his inability to come to terms with his past. He feels abandoned by the universe itself, as if no one else understands the scope of the pain he has endured. His belief that drastic action is required to save the universe is a desperate cry for recognition and a twisted form of validation. He seeks to prove that his pain has a purpose, that his suffering is justified by the changes he seeks to create. This internal battle between wanting to heal and believing that the world around him needs to change leads to a tragic sense of loneliness. Despite his immense power, Thanos remains alone, consumed by his thoughts, and disconnected from any meaningful relationships. He pushes others away because he believes that no one can truly understand him, making him the ultimate example of being misunderstood. His actions, though extreme, stem from a place of deep emotional pain that many can relate to, the fear that no one sees your suffering or understands your sacrifices. This emotional conflict is universal, resonating with anyone who has ever felt like an outsider or experienced the overwhelming weight of loneliness. The loneliness Thanos faces is not just physical, but emotional. He is surrounded by others, yet still feels completely isolated. His inability to connect with those around him, especially after losing everything he loved, reflects the devastating effects of emotional abandonment. Thanos' emotional state speaks to the universal fear of being alone, of not being able to share the burden of one's pain. His story shows how feelings of abandonment can warp a person's perception of reality, pushing them to make choices that alienate them even further from those who could offer support. For the audience, Thanos' journey is a mirror, reflecting the emotional struggles many face in their own lives. It reminds us of the importance of connection, of understanding, and of finding healing not through control, but through acceptance and empathy. His story serves as a warning of the dangers of isolating oneself, of building walls to protect from pain, only to find that those walls trap us in a cycle of loneliness. Thanos' journey is one that challenges our perceptions of power, control, and the emotional cost of being misunderstood. He represents a universal struggle, the desire for connection, but the inability to allow oneself to be truly seen. Throughout his story, Thanos battles loneliness, a loneliness that stems not only from the loss of his home and family, but also from his choice to keep everyone at a distance. This emotional isolation is not a product of physical distance alone, but a profound internal exile. He has built walls around his heart, convinced that no one can understand his pain. Yet, this isolation only deepens his feelings of abandonment. He pushes others away, thinking that their inability to comprehend his mission means they cannot share his burdens. The truth, however, is that in pushing people away, Thanos only further entrenches his sense of being misunderstood. His belief that he alone is capable of seeing the universe's true needs isolates him not just from others, but from his own humanity. This emotional detachment becomes a vicious cycle, where his feelings of loneliness and abandonment lead to more isolation, and this isolation reinforces his belief that he is alone in his suffering. It is a tragic realization that resonates with anyone who has ever felt like they don't belong, that their pain is unique and cannot be shared. Thanos, in his pursuit of balance, mirrors this experience of emotional estrangement, where the fear of being misunderstood becomes more powerful than the desire for connection. He feels abandoned by the universe, and that his suffering is the price he must pay for saving it. This mindset leads him to make choices that further isolate him from those who might offer understanding or solace. His story speaks to the human condition of feeling disconnected, of believing that our struggles are too great for anyone else to understand. Thanos' emotional journey highlights the dangers of such isolation, where the more we shut ourselves off from others, the more we risk losing touch with our own humanity. His journey is a reminder of the importance of vulnerability, of allowing ourselves to be seen, even in the face of our deepest fears. For the audience, Thanos' internal battle is a reflection of their own struggles with loneliness, abandonment, and the fear of being misunderstood. His story encourages viewers to reflect on their own emotional experiences and consider how isolation affects their own lives. In the end, Thanos' tragic flaw is not just his quest for control, but his refusal to embrace the connections that could have healed his wounds. His story is a poignant reminder that no matter how powerful or determined we may be, we all need others to truly understand and heal from our pain.